The other thing that I wanted to just ask you guys a question about was in the reading for this week's seminar, the author provided an illustration about in-group superiority and out-group inferiority that had a group of white male students in a gathering of all white male students, and how they acted, how they made jokes and derogatory comments about several different racial and ethnic groups, but noted that when just two of those people were together, those comments weren't made. So I think it's kind of an interesting dynamic for those who work with youth, and wondered if you could talk a little bit about that group dynamic and why members of a group might feel empowered to talk that way, even if personally they're not comfortable with it, and how leaders can help with that process.
So there's multiple aspects. I know Chris and I both have things to say, but the pressure for social conformity is massive. And generally in the United States, because we have this the sense of individualism, but now it's this rugged, extreme form of individualism. We lack community where we have other people that we're in relationship with that we can identify with. And so I think there's a collective yearning for some sort of community. And so that's provided in a context where all of these white men are together. There's that sense of community. And so when racist jokes start being made, you're faced with, if you don't like that, you're faced with standing up for what you think is right at the expense of belonging in that group. And so the social pressure of belonging is one of the things that's at play here. And so that's what you have to wrestle with. And so, Chris, what else do you want to add to that?
Yeah, and so I think with respect to youth groups, this is really powerful. I mean, I can remember lots of dumb things I did because of this pressure to conform, right? Even in church, right? So I'm saying this thinking about things I did in church. And so what I would have in hindsight, if I were the leader, because I'm thinking about it from a leadership perspective now, not youth perspective, you have to create the environment where that kind of behavior, you can't say it's not tolerated, but you create a culture of accountability and inclusion, right? So you have to talk about the ways in which we welcome all people, and you have to genuinely mean it, right? So you have to create the space where you say, this is how we treat all people, and this is what it looks like. You don't just actually say this is how we treat all people, we love all people. You talk about how loving all people includes not what we call backstage racism, right? Loving all people is not falling into the normalizing traps that are set, right, to perform, to uphold the white racial frame, right? And so you make it so that your youth groups or your groups, that they understand the importance of diversity, they understand the importance of inclusion, they understand how we're all created in the image of God, that they theologically, right, that they understand the importance of loving your neighbor and what that looks like. And you give examples of what that doesn't look like, that how young people do. So whether it be teasing someone, whether it be making those racialized jokes, maybe it be making sexist jokes, all those kinds of things that young people do to try to fit in, you have to create the space. Like, no, this isn't what we mean we say fit in. When we're talking about fitting in this space, we're talking about radical inclusion, right? And you have to demonstrate that, not just once, but lots of times in that space, so that that can become normal. Because again, as Seth said, what you're pushing up against is this idea where you recognize that racism, and I would say sexism in a sense, is normal. And so we're trying to teach our young people to do something that's not normal, right? That isn't normalized by saying, no, what we believe the normal ought to be is love, is compassion, is acceptance. And so we're going to create the space where this is normal. So you have to talk about it, name it, teach it, embody it. It needs to be a part of, literally, it needs to be in some way a part of, I would say, every lesson. I called it, when I was a pastor, I called it acting like Jesus. All my sermons ended with, and this is how we embody this way of being like Christ. And so you have to find somewhere where you can weave that in, because ultimately, it's about formation, about giving people positive habits and ways of being in the world that they can continue to emulate, that while at first they may feel kind of forced, it becomes a part of their practice, and then just becomes a part of who they are.
And there's some advantages to this, because depending on the level of age group you're dealing with, youth really like to push against the system kind of idea, right? So if you can frame this kind of love ethic that we're talking about, this way of being in the world, as being countercultural, as being like pushing against the things that they don't like, it is more motivating for them to start practicing that.
Right. Well, and it's important to start it with young children as well, right? So it becomes part of the formation for them all the way through.
Yep.
Well, you saw the thing in the reading today where the girl was 3 years old and she was doing, and I'm like, I mean, it is something I think I'm particularly attuned to because of my biracial son. Like, I'm just really attuned to the way in which other kids talk to him or treat him.